to have this very interesting conversation. I find it interesting. I say it's interesting because it's a topic that many people have uh, talked about or thought about, but never really thought about it to ask what does the law says, what does standard HR practice say, and what does international rules of practice say. Today I'll be talking about prayers in the workplace, and I'll be trying to answer the very basic question: can an employer mandate prayers in the workplace? I'll be speaking in it from the point of view of the laws in the US, in Canada, and in Nigeria, and also be talking about HR practice, what is expected of the modern workplace, and things like that. My goal is to just create a perspective for us because everybody should be able to answer that basic question. I'm an employer, I am an entrepreneur, I run a business, I am whatever is your capacity. I'm also You are also a religious person, right? You could be religious, you could belong to any of the faiths, and you believe in prayer. And you also then believe that your organization should have a prayer program. Now, can you mandate employees to come to that prayer meeting? That's the question I want to tackle. And this thing that just not come from nowhere. It came because an incident happened in Nigeria. In this particular incident, there was a memo. Allegedly, they claimed the memo was leaked. But the ministry never denied it. The memo was from a ministry in Nigeria to staff, telling them to attend a prayer meeting to pray for one of the mandates of the ministry. It was a Ministry of Agriculture and Food Security in Nigeria, and so part of the memos was signed asking employees to attend the prayer meeting and telling them that on specific days, not only are they to attend the prayer meeting, they are also supposed to come fasted, right? So that's the context, and that's what has led to this conversation. And I'm sure you wonder whether that has happened before in the US or that happened elsewhere. It's happened in many places where employers have mandated prayers and people have had different attitude. Interesting, in the case in Nigeria, due to the lot of awareness and a lot of feedback from members of the community, the prayer was suspended. Note, it wasn't stopped. The prayers were suspended, and the ministry gave an explanation. And the explanation they gave was a very interesting explanation. They said many people have died in the ministry, many people have died in the recent past, and they felt they needed to organize prayers as part of the ways to support employees through that process. And they said, well, the same way they have also organized aerobics and other wellness initiatives. So in their own mind, the organization, they're organizing things like fitness and stuff like that. It's also on the same pedestal as the prayer their prayer meeting they have called with fasting, as a way to help employee wellness because of the number of people that died. Interesting explanation. You want to ask yourself, is it a very plausible thing to say? So, what are we dealing with here? We're dealing with an organization that wants people to pray. They have had people that have died, and the leadership feels, I've used the word leadership because the letter was signed by the head of HR. I'm also a human resource professional, so it's a leadership mandate, and that's what makes it very unique in the sense that the prayer was not called by an individual. The prayer was called by the organization because it was on the organization's masthead, and it was signed by the director of human resources. So in that context, it had an administrative outlook, it had a leadership outlook, and it had a toga that suggests that it is the people, it is the organization asking people to come for prayer. There was no part of that letter that suggested that the prayers were mandatory or not. But an employee that sees anything signed by the HR can conclude it's a mandatory to do. I want to thank all those who have been joining on Facebook and on YouTube. I can see Mrs. Bose Faremi, I can see Mr. Ifalo, our former registrar at FUTA. I can see Mr. Shai Adino. Thanks. I can see my good friend from day back, Terry Daniel, joining. Thank you very much. Okay, so I'll acknowledge more people as they join. So that is what has happened. An employee that sees a memo signed by HR, hey, Jack Nicholson, thanks for joining from Nova Scotia, Canada. Iram, thanks for joining. An employee that sees a memo signed by an HR director has a reasonable expectation that it is binding. So that letter, while it did not say you must attend, because it was signed by it carries an authority that suggests this is a school, this is an organizational program. Should that happen? Let me provide some context so that you can understand what we're dealing with. There is really no problem. There's nothing wrong if an employer says he wants his employees to pray. There is nothing wrong. You have not violated any law if you say employees should pray. You will be violating laws if you mandate them and say it is compulsory. That's one. The second part of it is the fact that if you write them to attend a prayer meeting and you did not write that it is voluntary, the employees have a reasonable expectation that it is mandatory. That is when you are now crossing the line and you may be getting into trouble. Please note, prayer in many countries is an acceptable thing to do. It's sometimes in some countries it's actually a lawful thing to do. Let me start with the US. The US has a national day of prayer, right? A national day of prayer wherein the president is present and there are prayers made. So the US has that. The US has one of the most popular things they say in America, including by the leadership, is God bless America. That's a prayer. So it is lawful to pray. It's not banned. It's okay. In Canada, why in Canada we do not have things like that necessarily, but Canada is very pro-Christian, right? We do a lot of things that suggest we believe in prayer, right? When we pray sometimes, or when we have to give allegiance to the King of the UK, sometimes you remember the anthem is God save the Queen, now God save the King. It's a prayer. So in Nigeria, Nigeria is the king of prayers. So let's start. Nigeria has a couple of things that are like national emblems written in our constitution that are prayers. They are part of the Nigerian constitution. They are prayers. Part of the Nigerian constitution is a pledge, national pledge. I pledge to Nigeria, my country. What is the last line of the national pledge? So help me God. That's a prayer in the Nigerian constitution, right? So it is not illegal to pray in Nigeria. If you remember the whole national anthem that we have, remember it had 2 stanzas. The second stanza is a prayer. O God of creation, direct our noble cause, guide our leaders right. I have not learned the new national anthem because it's new. But the old one, the whole second stanza is a prayer. So in Nigeria, the laws of the land does not say you cannot pray. But the laws of the land can, for example, say you cannot mandate prayer. And that's the whole question here. You cannot mandate someone who is not a person of your faith, or who is not your church member or your Muslim member. You cannot mandate him to attend a prayer. 1. 2, you cannot be quiet whether you are mandating or not when he can presume that you are mandating him. And that is what I want us to be very careful of. So you are an employer, you want people to pray, you now send out a letter, and you did not write in the letter, this prayer is voluntary. Everybody in your organization that has a reasonable expectation that is mandatory. And on the basis of that, they can sue you for coercion, religious coercion. And virtually in all the 3 countries I've mentioned, religious coercion has been seen as an act of discrimination, which is punishable by law. It has been seen as an unfair practice in all these 3 countries I've mentioned, and it has also been seen as creating an hostile work environment. There's a very interesting case, EEOC versus United Health Programs of America, that define this issue about religious coercion. And that's what I want us to be very conscious of. When you mandate prayer, is religious coercion. And I'm saying this because there are also school owners here that every morning at the assembly, you mandate prayers. I will want to recommend, if you can, to get consent. In the case of dealing with school assemblies, when you have to do that. So remember a couple of things. Some countries have no national religion. For example, Nigeria has no national religion. It's actually in Nigerian Constitution. It says there shall not be a national religion. When you call for prayers as an employer or you mandate prayers, there are a couple of risks you may face. Number one is you face the risk of being accused of religious coercion. I've explained that earlier. When you ask somebody to do any religious act and it is mandatory, the person can say you are doing religious coercion. In that case I mentioned in the US, the organization was filed several hundreds of thousands for that coercion. So if you ask me to come to pray and you are my employer and you say it's mandatory, I can sue you. Now, I can even sue you despite the fact that me, the employer, is a Christian, I'm a Christian. Religious coercion does not mean the two of us are in opposite religion, right? In the context of a workplace. So you are a member of Deeper Life Bible Church, you're a member of Mountain of Fire, or you're a Catholic, or you are whatsoever, and you are a Christian. You now call a meeting because all of us, all the employees in your organization are all Christians. You call a meeting and say, I must attend. I am also a Christian. In fact, I am a pastor. Eh? You have invited me to come to the workplace to come and pray specifically. I can sue you for religious coercion, despite the fact that we are both Christians. So religious coercion is not a question of, oh, it's against my faith. So, some people say, well, what if everybody in your employees, if all of them are all Christians, you can be sued for religious coercion if you make it mandatory. The problem is you making it mandatory. The problem is not you calling a prayer meeting. The problem is you making it mandatory. The second problem is that you being silent that it is not mandatory. Please note those two things. You called a meeting, you said it's mandatory, religious coercion. You called a meeting, wrote it on a letterhead. You did not say it is not mandatory, you did not say it's voluntary. I, as an employee, have a reasonable expectation that it's mandatory, and therefore I can sue you for religious coercion. That's number one. Number two, risk you bear if you mandate prayer is a question of it may likely show that you are not inclusive. Now, when it shows you are likely inclusive, it is likely that you will get into trouble, because if an employee can prove that you are not inclusive, then it can likely accuse you of creating an hostile work environment. Right? An hostile work environment is any condition you create that makes somebody not feel comfortable while working for you. And in Nigeria, in the US and Canada, in those three countries, you will get serious fine as an employee if you ever allow that to happen. The third risk you bear is the question of lack of accommodation. Now, that's a problem you're going to have a big burden on your head in Canada and in the US. In Nigeria, workplace accommodation is not a very developed part of the law. But in Canada and the US, it is a serious, I'm emphasizing it. Religious accommodation is very serious. What does religious accommodation mean? Accept the fact that I can practice my faith the way I want. And this is very important. At another time, we're going to talk about this question of religious accommodation in the context of the workplace. Because you say in Nigeria, for example, many Nigerians are Muslim. They have to go for Jumat on Fridays. And they go to tell their boss that the boss said they can't go. If you try that in some country, you're going to get into trouble with the law. In US and in America, because of what is called religious accommodation. You have to accommodate everybody's religion. Please note, in Canada, Ontario to be very specific, it's not just religious accommodation, it is religious and creed accommodation. Very, very important. Why am I making this distinction? And this happens in organizations that have many Christians, so that you can understand. So think about this. The CEO, the owner of the business, attends a Baptist or an Anglican or a Deeper Life or Mountain of Fire or any church. Then there is a Christian in that organization, one of his employees who is also a Christian. This employee attends a sect in the Christian faith. And in that sect, when they want to pray, they have to go outside to pray. Then the CEO says, no, no, you can't do that because it's not a Christian practice. That I am also a Christian, they don't do it in my church, and Christians don't do it. Therefore, I will not permit you to do how you want to pray. The law says you are supposed to accommodate the creed, not just religion. And the creed is just what a sect in a religion does. So you may be perceived to having lack of accommodation, and you may get yourself into trouble with that. So, because this is supposed to be something that we should learn from and get better with, what should you do if you really want your employees to pray? I'm going to allow people to ask questions on the various platforms. I'm just trying to set the scene, and then some of the questions people have sent earlier, that's what I'm trying to respond to. So what should you do? Number one is, if you want to call a prayer in a workplace, HR should not be the one calling the prayer. Let an employee call the prayer. Yeah, part of the mistake the Federal Ministry of Agriculture did was calling the prayer meeting and asking HR to write a memo. Never use your official letterhead to call for a prayer meeting. Don't do that. No, don't do that. Yes, somebody is asking a question. What if it's a babalawo? Would that be okay to do in the office? You can't. It's also prayer. It's also religious. You can bring your babalawo to your office as a CEO, as a business owner, but you can't mandate it. So the babalawo cannot, for example, says he wants to cleanse the office and be sprinkling holy water, whatever water it is, and sprinkles on me. I mean, I will sue the babalawo for battery. I will sue you for creating a hostile work environment, and I will sue you for lack of religious accommodation. So even the babalawo is not protected, and that's why I use the word prayer, whether it's Muslim, Christian, or traditional. So don't do a memo. So what you should do is that let an employee be the one call the prayer. Let an employee be the one call the prayer. Now, it doesn't matter whether the HR director is the employee. It doesn't really matter. It is better HR is not involved. So somebody in sales, somebody in marketing, somebody in engineering can call a meeting and say, we want to do a prayer. And because people have been dying, I want to pray about it. You can give them a space to do that. If that employee calls a prayer, as a CEO, you can attend. I will actually generally recommend you should attend because it's helpful. And you can also, you remember your goal is to pray. I mean, you don't have to be the one leading the prayer. So if you are invited, attend. So now, don't forget, you are the president, you are the CEO, you are the whatever you are. You want them to pray that people have been dying, and don't want that to continue. And then just tell the idea to somebody in your team, and tell that person to be the one to call people for the prayer, and be present. Be present. If they ask you to raise a prayer point, but don't be the one calling the paper. Also, you need to train your people. I mean, when there are challenges, how to deal with religious diversity and things like that. Please note a couple of things you should never do when it comes to prayers in the workplace. Number one is, don't ever make it seem as if you're endorsing a religion. Remember, your workplace, except is a religious organization. So if it's a church, if it's a mosque, if it's a Christian-based ministry, then yes, that is what it is by law. So you can do a couple of things. But if it's a secular organization, MTN, Moji Mobile, whatever, if your member does not say religious organization, if when I was hired you did not say it's a religious organization, then don't do anything that will institute a faith practice. I am saying this, I mean, my dear friend, Brother Muiwa will be aware of this. There used to be like two banks in Nigeria, banks that use money and mandate attendance to prayer meetings and choral service or Christmas carol services. You can't mandate that. I dare say, because those organizations were publicly quoted funds, they shouldn't actually use money of the bank to organize a Christmas carol. They shouldn't, because it's public money. Now, they can donate to a public parole. So maybe, for example, a church can write to them, or a mosque can write them and say, we want to celebrate the birthday of Muhammad. Yes, the law in Nigeria allows them to donate to that organization to host a Christmas carol or to do something to celebrate the bank. You can do that under karma, on charity donations, but you cannot use the operating expense of a bank, a secular organization, to organize a prayer meeting or to organize a Christmas carol or to organize anything like that, because what you are doing is that you are instituting a faith practice. That's what is called in law a faith practice. A faith practice is anything that can be identified by a religious organization, prayers, a type of singing. I dare say, and somebody be asking me, oh, what does this mean? There's another bank that organizes an end of year party and does that. It's not a faith practice. As ridiculous as it could be, it's not a faith practice. So it's something very different. Okay, so don't do that. Number two, don't ever write any memo, any official communication, any email, text message, SMS, asking people to come to a prayer meeting in a workplace. Don't do that as the organization or as the head of the organization. Don't ever do that. Thanks, Mr. Daudu. Thanks for your feedback. And thanks for joining. It's nice seeing you earlier today. And don't mandate prayers. That's the last thing I want to say. Don't mandate prayers. You can organize prayers, but don't mandate prayers. Prayers should always be voluntary. And if you actually want to think about prayers, it's talking to God. Why are you forcing anybody to come and talk to God? Why? There's no need for that. If you actually understand the concept of prayer, then it should be voluntary, right? So I've gotten like 5 questions before now that I'll try to answer. And I'll try to answer the question. And then people can ask the question as we go on. One is, can you mandate prayers? No. In Nigeria, no. In Canada, no. In the USA, possibly yes. In Brazil, possibly yes. In Portugal, possibly yes. In the Vatican City, possibly yes. In some context in those countries. Thanks for joining, Mr. Michael Agbi. Thanks, Mr. Kishi, Mr. Daudu. Thanks again, Mr. Adeniji, Ambassador. Thank you very much. Yes, I got a message from Mr. Mike. He said, thanks for joining. Mr. Michael Agi says it's a must in our organization every first working day of the month to pray and do praise worship. Yes, you may do that, but don't mandate it. Actually, you may tell people, you may tell people they must pray every morning. I'm just going to quote Mr. Ani. He says, you don't need a structure around prayer. It's a conversation with your prayer, with your maker. Thanks, very apt contribution. Thanks, Mr. Ani, Ambassador. So the idea is you can organize a prayer meeting like Mr. Agbi said, but don't make it mandatory. Let people pray when they want to pray. Now, let people, if you want them to come together to pray, let an employee lead it. So somebody says, can you mandate a prayer in those 3 countries? No. But you may be able to mandate prayer as part of a program. So you may say every meeting shall start with a prayer. You can do that. Why is that the case? Because it's an agenda for a meeting. It's not the purpose of the meeting. And I'm going to mention those same countries that says you can't do religious coercion have agendas that have prayers. In the National Assembly of Nigeria, the first order of business, the first thing they do, in the Senate of the US and the House of Reps in the US, in the Legislative House in Canada, in the House of Lords in the UK, I mentioned 4 countries. In the European Commission, when they start the sessions, the first thing they do is to pray. So it is part of the business of the day. Now that is acceptable in those contexts, right? So I've tried to answer that question. Yeah, Mr. Ivy says is a must. That's what the owner wants. And maybe you tell the owner to watch this video so he doesn't get himself into trouble. One thing I always tell people when I do all this Prof Explain this series is that I try to raise this. Mr. Yesayot, thanks so much for joining, sir. It's been a long while I saw you. I try to let people know I raise these issues because somebody is going to get into trouble if you don't know it. I give you an instance. A guy has a tattoo on his body in Nigeria. This happened in Nigeria. He has a tattoo on his body. He works for the DSS, the Directorate of State Security, and they sacked him because of the tattoo. The guy went to court and said they can't sack him because of tattoo. The guy won the case. In Nigeria. But why should you sack somebody for tattoo? So I raise this issue because it's going to get to a point where, like Mr. Agi said, the manager said, you must attend the prayer meeting, and I don't want to attend. One of the questions I've gotten ahead is also, okay, so what do I do if I want? I'll come to that question. So you can't mandate it at the end of the day. Yes, Mr. Daudu has a question that says, suppose the owner of a private organization enforces prayer in a particular area for his employees. Can an employee decline to participate if it does not align for their faith? Okay, so let me jump to that. I think that's the third question I've received before now. Some people said question is, number one is, if the owner of the organization mandates prayer, this is where you need wisdom, tact, and also emotional intelligence. It's important for you to walk up to HR, not the owner of the business, and say, this is my faith, I find it difficult to do this. It's important for you to express it to HR. Let HR be the one go tell the owner of the business, right? Don't go to the owner of the business yourself if you don't want to participate. Number two, if you feel that HR cannot do that, you can tell your boss if you don't want to participate. But, and I'm being open here, and I hope people will understand my point. If you can accommodate the prayer, but you don't want to participate, you can be there and not say anything. Please note what I am saying very carefully so that you don't misunderstand me. I give you this instance, and I hope you don't mind this example. There is a story in the Bible of somebody that met Elijah the prophet. It was Naaman, and Naaman was healed. And Naaman told Elisha something. He said, when my master bows to his God, because my master leans on me, I will also have to bow. I hope it's cool. And Elijah said, go ahead. So in this case, Naaman will be going with his boss to where they were going to worship, but he doesn't believe in that God. But it's his job. So Naaman's argument is that it's part of my duty for this man to rest on me. I am not worshiping that God, but I will have to be present. So think about it, because we should be careful to be conscious of the context of everyone. Somebody who is the ADC to President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, when President Bola Ahmed Tinubu is going to the mosque, that ADC has to go with him, even though the ADC is the pastor. Is that not? He doesn't have a choice. His job is to follow the president. So if the president is going to church, mosque, Babalawo, wheresoever, or he's going to Ojudioba, he has to follow. So in those contexts, you may have to align because of the fact that it is the wise thing to do. But if you feel very strongly with it, go to HR, respectfully go to HR and say, I don't want to be part of it. Please help me tell the CEO. If you think you have access to a more senior member of staff, you want to do that. But please turn it down tactfully, respectfully, and why do you need to do that? That employer can work against you if it's very immature. I mean, or very religious. You may say actually that you are the Jonah. Remember the story of Jonah in the Bible when they were telling people to pray and Jonah did not join the prayer meeting. Remember what they did? They threw him inside the water. Don't let them use you to sacrifice because you refuse to join the prayer meeting. Wisdom is spiritual to direct. The other question, and I hope I answered that question very well. So somebody said, I'm an employer. I want my staff to pray every day. What should I do? Number one, communicate what you want, but don't communicate verbally in writing. Don't ever write it down. I want people to pray. I expect us to pray. Make participation voluntary and tell people if you don't want to attend, please don't attend. It's voluntary. If you can't, don't be the one leading the prayer. Let another employee do that, and then allow people of all faiths to do that. Sometimes I just feel that we just get a little bit too fastidious. I'm going to share experience here, and I know there's some Chevron people here that may relate with the story. I used to be the HR business partner in our operation facility somewhere in Delta State some years back, and it was time for Ramadan. And so I called the imam and I asked him the question. I said, so what do you think I should do as HR to help your people for these 30 days of fasting? He said, he asked me, he said, I should repeat myself. I said, yeah, I just wanted to know. I am as head of HR here. My role is to ensure that you people have the best life possible. I know you guys are going to fast for 30 days. So, what do I do as the head of HR to make you guys have a great time in your fasting? He went quiet and said, Prof, I know you. I know you are a pastor. I am pleasantly surprised you are asking what you can do for us to make the fasting convenient for us. That nobody has ever asked him that question in my position. And he said, oh, they have already made arrangements with supply chain to ensure they eat their food and all of those things. I am not a Muslim. I don't necessarily align with the fasting or not, but these are human beings that I can make their life better. A couple of weeks when they started fasting, I went back to meeting. I said, so I know it's about 10 days of fasting. What should I do to make sure you guys continue? He said, you still remember we're still fasting. On the last day of fast, in my role as the head of HR, I sent a mail to all the supervisors. I said, tomorrow employees will be, because it's 24-hour operations, employees will be breaking their fast and it's going to be a festive day. If any employee requires time to go and pray between 8 and 10, please make sure you give them time and greet them. Just provided some coaching for the managers to be sensitive. And that's part of what we need to start to think about doing in our workplaces. We should be sensitive to the needs of that. Another question I got was, so what should HR do in those kind of instances? So in this case, think about that brilliant lady who had to write that letter. What should she have done? Maybe it's a minister that said, do me a memo and go and write. I remember one of my very good friends in Canada said, but what if it's the minister that said, go and organize a prayer meeting? What will you do? HR has to do it. So what should HR have done? Because I feel HR messed up by writing that letter. The first thing I think every HR, and I know quite a number of people in HR are here, is one, start by doing a diversity audit of your organization, right? A diversity of, know the composition of people that are in your organization. So, for example, where I worked before, I knew there were Muslims. I knew they were going to fast. I knew the imam. Actually, my plan was that on the day they will be breaking their fast, that they will be going to pray on the last day, I will be at the mosque. But I traveled the day before. I will be at the mosque and congratulate them for ending the fast. Now, some Christians will tell me I'm going too far. But the question is, if we actually understand what is our expectation to relate with people, we'll have a different view about it. Yes, so when I came back, I actually took refreshments to the imam. Yeah, I took refresh. I think I took drinks and biscuits and fruits and something like that. So, oh, you guys are finished fasting. So it's just a way to connect. So first thing is, know the people that work in your organization. Understand their diversity. What is their religious diversity? Are they Muslims? Are they Christians? That helps you to know what to be sensitive to, right? You'll be shocked. There are herbalists in your organization you don't know. Herbalists. I told you I did HR where employees stayed in a camp 24/7, right? Cleaners come to ask questions what they should do, because when they were trying to clean somebody's room, they saw shere or they saw sand, and you know that thing they touch when they do ifa in Yoruba land in the big oil company where people are supposed to be elite. And the answer, I couldn't touch it. Oh, yeah, but you used to come to church. Why couldn't you touch it? So you must understand, are there Muslims, are there Christians? So you can know, if you want to do prayer meetings, you know how to deal with that. I mean, if you wanted to do a prayer meeting, I will, if I was in your shoes, if I was really convinced as the owner of a business to do that, I will call the imam of my employees and tell them, guy, I want to start a prayer meeting. And I want us, think about it. So Federal Ministry of Agri said about 5 or 6 directors have died in the short prayer. I'll call the man and say, Imam, wait, you did sleep? You didn't notice that 6 people have prayed, have died here. So what I want to do is I want to call a prayer meeting for us to pray about this thing must end. So I have told, remember I said HR should not be the one calling prayer. I have told the head of sales, who is a pastor, to call the meeting. You are the imam. You too, when you get to your mosque, you too pray about it. That's what you can do as HR. You can call the two heads of the Christians and the Muslims and say, guys, people are dying. We don't know what's happening. We need to help our people. Guys, can you organize prayer meetings? And if you organize a prayer meeting, I'm going to come. That's something you can want to do after you do your development. Have policies on religious accommodation. What is acceptable, what is not acceptable, what you should do, what you should not do. Thanks for joining, Mrs. Professor Oyenide. Thanks so much. Thanks, PF, Pressful for joining. And finally, for HR, it's important for us to know how to help employees feel all right. So think about this, because it's important. It's very easy for us to quickly blame the folks in the Ministry of Agriculture, but let's understand their context. They said many of their colleagues have died in a short period of time, and therefore they want to do something about it. I feel the first thing they should do is not prayer. No, the first thing they should do is to get a mental health specialist or a psychologist to come and speak with all the employees under the auspices of what is called in HR Employees Assistance Program. They should bring a psychologist to the workplace. They should bring a medical person to the workplace to come and talk to all employees about trauma, about deaths, about how to mourn, about all of that. That's the first thing you should do in response to it. Now, they can now leverage that to now call that prayer. Because the psychologists will likely have asked them questions. What do they feel? Some of them will feel, in this place things are not working well. I will read there's a demonic infection. Now, it's coming from the engagement of this psychologist. You can now leverage that to then do your prayer meeting. And like Mr. Dennis said, what is wrong with a joint fellowship? Some people's faith will not accommodate this idea of Muslim Christian in one meeting. So could do a joint fellowship to say, okay, we're going to pray. The Muslim imam will pray for 10 minutes, and then the Christian will pray 10 minutes after. You could do that, but I know some people's faith will not do that. So that's why I would rather recommend that. Why don't you ask the two separate religions or the other religion because you want to be very sensitive. So you say we should do joint prayer meeting. So you say the first prayer is going to be done by the imam, then the second prayer will be done by the pastor. What if there is somebody who is an Isheshe person? Will you also ask them to? I just feel that becomes a bit sensitive at the end of the day. So it's better for you to let them pray in their various organizations, as the case may be. I have another question here. What if an institution is owned by a church religious organization and their religious inclination is a public knowledge, and the employment letter has a clause that says employees will be expected to do other things that may be assigned to them? Will it be safe to mandate prayer for both staff and students? Now, thanks for asking this question, Mr. Adina. Very great question. If it's a religious institution, you are expected to be religious, right? However, what I will ask us to be sensitive about is you cannot bring everybody in a religious institution on the same level of the religion you practice. I will explain this. So it's a non-profit, that an orphanage, but the orphanage is a Christian ministry, but it's not a church. It's an orphanage that is a Christian ministry. The level of workplace faith demand you will place on the directors cannot be at the same thing you place on the gate man. So while you can say all directors shall be expected to fast once a week, you can't say that to the accountant. Because that accountant can say, I am not a representative of management, so I cannot be forced to exercise so much of faith because I work for you, right? So if you say, oh, it's a religious institution, it's not a church, it's a ministry, and we want to mandate some religious practices, please note you must segregate the people involved. You can't ask everybody to do the same thing. People who are in management or representation of management, you may find it may be more legal to bind them with those religious practices versus people who are further down the line. So that would be my thought around that. So I was trying to explain. Okay, so first bring in a psychologist. When people die, when there's calamity at work, when there's trauma, when anything happens, bring in a psychologist, bring in a mental health expert, bring in somebody that understands psychology to talk to your employees. That's the first thing, not prayer. From that, you can now leverage as part of the therapy. Remember, You can introduce prayer as a therapy for grief. You can introduce music as a therapy for grief. So part of your response to this situation is we're brought in a mental health person. We're now bringing interventions that are trauma reducing, trauma management therapy. And that prayer meeting is a trauma management therapy. So we're praying to God to ensure it doesn't happen again, but also to let everybody know that this is a way for us to protect ourselves. You are dealing with prayer as something to solve a problem for people, but you are presenting it as therapy, not just a prayer message, right? Part of it is you may actually say you want people to have a music listening session. You may have a reading session where you can ask three people in the workplace that have things that inspire them or that make them, when they are afraid, to be bold. You can ask them to read there, but you must present it in a trauma response package, starting with employee assistance program, followed by prayer or any therapeutic thing you think you need to do. That is what I would recommend. If you're a church, if you're a mosque, the law or the creation of the organization expects you to have people who believe in that faith. So you can make demands on them. So a church can say every church member must attend church on Sunday. They can, because it is a church. The service, the Sunday service, is the work of the church. So you can mandate all your employees that they must attend there. However, there are certain things you can mandate. Number one, look at certain the level the person is in the organization. You may not be able to mandate your gate man or the driver of your school bus to attend your church every Sunday. It can say it's coercion. Number two, it is not everything you can mandate about that person. So, for example, you can't mandate them to give tithes from their salary. No. Yes, he's a pastor in your church. You now say it is mandatory and they must show evidence of paying tithe of the salary you pay them. The law in Nigeria said that it is wicked employment practice when you do that. Number three, you can't mandate that they must contribute, receiving their salary in the community, in the finance bank owned by the church. So, for example, some churches have microfinance bank. I know Redeem has several. I know Christ Embassy has. So you cannot, the law says you cannot mandate them to be collecting their salary from that bank. It's not your business where I collect my salary. An employee in Nigeria can collect salary from Agbomage Microfinance Bank or Babalawo Microfinance Bank. It is not the role of the employer to mandate where they should pay. So you can't tell some categories of employees, you can't mandate them paying tithes because it's not part of your duty. You can't mandate them where they should be collecting salary, and you can't mandate them to take some actions that may violate their own private rights. Okay, because of the fact that they are working for a religious institution. Okay, I think I've answered all the questions I've been asked on this call and all the ones I got before now. I'm wondering if there are other people that have questions I need to answer. I'll be willing to do that. I want to respect our time. I know many people have been here for excess of 30-40 minutes, and I will want to just ensure that we'll stop at the nick of time. So I'm just trying to check, is anybody, I can't see any new question here. So what I just want to generally recommend for all of us that watch, and I want to thank you for the time you have spent with me here, is whatever you want to do, when it comes to religion, you need to be very sensitive when you are dealing in the workplace. Remember, your church, your employees are not your staff, are not your church members. They are not your Muslim brothers. They are employees and they have employee rights. I am working on a project. I trust the Lord to help me to finish before the end of the year. There's something I've observed in the last 2 years. The number of people that are suing churches and church organization as employees of them. So I'm giving an instance. A pastor, there are like 3 or 4 cases, 4 cases that was determined a couple of months back, where 4 employees of a church in Lagos sued, and that included a pastor. They were employees and they sued the church for something the church didn't do, and they won. The 4 cases I mentioned. Last month, somebody, a former employee of Pastor Shimolu's church in Lagos, Kingsway, sued them. He lost. So it's not all of them that win. There's a university owned by a church in Nigeria. At a minimum, I have read of nothing less than 6 court cases instituted by staff who are their members, and they all won. So we're turning a bend in Nigeria where people are separating the role of a church as where I worship or where I work from that church as my employer. I was telling my dear sister and friend, Sister Ibiti, this during the week, that the responsibility of an employer is unique. It's different from, I tell you, it's my church, it's my pastor. So, for example, our father in the Lord. Once our father in the Lord becomes your employer, the law starts to bring you direct responsibilities there. You know the funniest thing? There's a church in the US that said some members gathered together and said they are not satisfied with the way the church has been running the finances, and they decided they are going to sue the church to return their tithe and offering for the last 4 or 5 years. So we're getting to that point. That's why we're having all these conversations, for us to be aware that people are changing and people are getting more litigious when it comes to things like that. And we need to be very sensitive to that. So that's what I'm going to. So this idea of let us all pray, or we should just pray. Yes, part of the question, Mr. Asai, is that can a school mandate prayers for both staff and students? Yes, they can mandate prayers for staff and students if it's a religious school, if it's a religious based school. Yes. If it is a secular school and it's written there, you can have prayers or not, but you cannot mandate it. So you could give people a choice, or you could give people an opportunity to excuse themselves because they don't want to be part of that prayer, and people should not be punished because they chose to excuse themselves. So I think my work here is largely done. I want to thank everybody for their time. Thank you for joining me. I hope I have explained this. This series is called Prof Explain This, PET. And my goal is just to provide information and education for us, so that we don't get into trouble. I think we're doing well in when it comes to many things, but there are some salient things. Yesterday, I was talking to a group of HR people, and somebody said one of the biggest problems is that people don't know that employment law is not the same as HR practice, and therefore they think employment law is subservient to HR practice. At the end of the day, employment law is always changing. New things are coming on, court judgment are coming on, and people will likely get into trouble because they don't know what is the latest stance of the law. I want to thank you for your time. Thanks for joining me. I really appreciate you. Please have a great evening, and please don't get into trouble. Now, if you think you want to be part of this, or you want me to address anything or explain anything, you can put in the comment section on Facebook or on YouTube or wherever you are watching, and then I will be able to address it. It could be a long session like this or a short session. I could do that and organize a session based on that. If you also think you want to get some form of outline based on this thing I said, yes, I will be willing. If you also drop your email, I will be able to share a little bit of a leaflet just to explain some of the things I've said, and then you can gain from it. Thank you very much for your time. Have a nice day and have a great evening. And please be conscious of employment law. It could be as horrible as you can imagine if you don't do a good job in managing your people. Thank you, and bye-bye.